the need for practice and lots of practice. Good self-defense techniques have to be simple, but that doesn't mean they don't need to be practiced. So many people, and it's just the nature of people, of course, they take a 2-hour seminar, they take something online and they see the technique, they see how to do it, they know it now. They know how to defend themselves. Hardly. Maybe you watch a video on the side kick to the knee, you see it's fairly simple, you practice it a little bit and you can do it, and then maybe in a dangerous situation you would use it. I kind of doubt it, frankly. Just because something's simple doesn't mean it does not have to be practiced over and over. And I'm sure this is true in all kinds of fields. I'm sure it's true with musicians. I'm sure it's true with everybody. They, got to practice these things over and over and over again. I'll give you a great example. There's a technique in the American Combative System taught at the white belt level. There's 4 different counters where you're pinned up against a wall. And in this particular one, the person has pinned you on the wall and his arm is bent because he's trying to lift you up the wall. So you have to imagine a wall right here. Here's the wall. Here you are pinned on the wall. And the person has got you picked up like this. He's lifting you up off the ground. Usually a strong guy. He's doing it against a smaller guy. And the danger, of course, is the fist. That this fist could come at you. So if the wall wasn't there, I would have a student step back immediately from that free hand to start to mitigate anything coming from that free hand that could be coming. It's the same thing here, only you can't step backwards. So the natural thing is to step sideways. So here's the technique. I'm going to put the wall here now. I'm pinned on the wall. Here's the bad guy. He's used his left arm to lift. The free hand's here. Here's the technique. You step to the side. You really can't stop it. And you smash a tiger's claw into him because it brings your arm up in front of you. It's simple. So here's the experience I have with students across the board. Practicing with them, maybe a private lesson, and we get to that counter, and I pin them up against the wall, and they look at me for a moment, and then they do it. And I realize you haven't been practicing this, have you? And they're like, oh, I haven't been. And everybody runs through the same thing. You get to that, and let's say prior to that you worked maybe one of the rear bear hugs. There were quite a few moves to it. It takes a while to get it down, and you're finally getting it down. You're practicing over and over. And then you get to the wall defense, the bent lifting on the wall, and you step to the side and shinji up. Oh yeah, I remember that one. I got that one. And then you go to something else, and it never gets practiced. And nobody has it down because even though it's simple and you can remember it, there has to be a ton of repetition. I remember back in the days when I was living in Seattle and studying with the late professor, and I was powerlifting with a team, and Coach Willie Austin, great guy. He was a Christian as I am. I wasn't in those days, by the way. But Willie would evangelize, and he would go into the prisons, and he would bring the whole team, all of us, into the prisons. And these were major prisons. And I remember we went to the penitentiary in Oregon, and we were competing, and it was quite a big deal to, a lot of time to get in there finally. But, and everybody was great to us in there. But I remember it was up like on a second floor, and I'm looking down on the yard, and there's 3 guys out there. And one guy's kind of teaching the other guy, but he's holding the guy. The one guy's holding the guy in a rear bear hug over the arms. And what the guy is showing them in that bear hug is that you could slide your hip out of the side, which is something I teach, and you could reach back and grab the guy by the testicles. Well, they practiced it over and over and over. And I was watching, I was like, you can, the average guy in a martial arts school is doing some ridiculous thing. He does it 1 or 2 times, and then he's on to something else new. I'm telling you, they were repping over and over and over. And I'm like, man, they know what they're doing, and they're working the real stuff here. Another thing, too, to teachers, sometimes you feel like, and I can fall into this trap, I know a lot of techniques. And when I've shown you about everything, I know 10, 15 more. And it gets tempting, like, well, I already showed him that. Let me show him something new today on his private lesson. How about we work on the stuff you have that isn't developed yet? I mean, really, the right way would be to show a guy a couple things and have him work on it for a month before you even went into something new. And the problem, of course, is you might not keep students, but you got to watch out for trying to titillate people with too many things. I mean, there's some styles out there got several thousand different counterattacks. I know in some of the Ed Parker's Kempo karate, which was different than Chow's, but there were a lot of techniques, and part of it, I think, was for the commercial appeal that people could learn a new technique. I'm fall to that too, where I like to learn something new and get something new, but you got to watch that. You keep it simple. Back to talking about boxers, they just have the 4 strikes they work with. They practice them over and over and over and over, and they train. So select your best techniques. Professor Steiner always had this thing with 3 categories of techniques. Category 1, Category 2, and Category 3. Category 1 were techniques, you liked them, you knew you liked them. They're good, they're solid. Category 2 were techniques you weren't that good with yet, but you thought you could be, and you thought they would work for you. Category 3, and you gotta be careful with this category, are techniques you don't like. But you cannot decide you don't like a technique right away. You gotta practice it a lot of times for me before you realize, I don't like it, it doesn't fit me. Then I'd have to agree, okay, it doesn't fit you, let's just forget about that. You're never gonna use it. But take your best techniques and work with those and get good with those. There's a thing, it'd be way too hard to try to explain here, in American Combative called spontaneous kata. It's brilliant, something Steiner came up with. And the spontaneity occurs in 2 different ways the drill's done. In one way, the spontaneity has to do with the direction of the attackers. And the other way, the spontaneity has to do with the technique that's selected. Now, when a student gets to this level with me, he has learned 22 different attack combinations at this point, way more than a person needs. Why do they learn so many? To find what fits a guy. Who knows what they're going to find along the way? There's techniques I hate and somebody else likes them. And I've learned as a teacher not to prejudice people. Like, well, I don't like this one, but I'll show it to you anyways. I just show it. And then you have a guy and you realize, oh, he's really good with it, or she's really good with that. And she likes that technique. But when everybody gets to the spontaneous kata, I let them know, and it's at an advanced level. They've been with me for years. We're going to find out what combinations are truly spontaneous, which ones you really know. About everybody says the same thing. Well, I know all of them. I go, I know you know all of them, but they're not instinctive yet. No, they are. Well, there was this one student in particular, and he was a good student, but, well, let's just leave it at that. He claimed to me that he had all of them down. He insisted. I said, well, you really don't. And when the spontaneity came to the attacks, in other words, the directions were picked. I told him where his first attacker was, the second, the third, and the directions, and he had to do it as quickly as he could, and he had to pick amongst those 22 attacks. He would do the same attack every time. He would do it this guy, this guy, this guy, this, and he would do it well, but he would only do the one. And I point out to him, there's only one technique you have that's spontaneous. And he still just couldn't believe it. But the thing is, I find when a guy is at that level with me, and he's learned these 22 combinations, he's pretty lucky if 3 of them are spontaneous. Everybody thinks different. I know them all. I know you know them all, but they're not spontaneous. And through this drill, he may increase that 3, or she may increase that 3 to 5. And that would be huge. But it's that practice over and over. And then defensive work. Now understand when I say defensive work, what I mean. Offenses, we're ready for the guy. We're prepared to go. That spontaneous kata is in that category. You're prepared. You see the attackers coming. In the defensive, or what we call counterattacks, are those things like you're caught in a bear hug from the back. You're suddenly being choked. A knife stab's coming at you. All these different things that can happen. Really start to simplify your defenses. Now in the combative system, you learn a lot of different things as you move along. But here's the thing. It's just so some things become spontaneous. It's not such that you do this exact movement against this exact thing. So for example, the one-arm grab I talked about earlier. So when you're not on the wall, the important thing is to spin hard away from the free hand. Now what we end up doing with it after that, there's a throw. It wouldn't have to be that. But you learn a lot of different things just so you find what fits you and what works for you. You've got to practice.